Well, welcome everyone. My name is Marc-André Pigeon. I'm the director of the Canadian Centre for the Study Co-operatives, and this is another part of our piece in our conversation called Co-ops in a Time of Crisis. And it's my great pleasure today to be here with Patrick Smith, who is the VP Retail Operations at Federated Cooperatives Limited, based here in Saskatoon. So with that, I'm going to briefly ask Patrick to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about Federated Cooperatives, and also how you got into this world. How did you enter into this world of cooperatives? And if you've come from outside the world, what have you observed about how it works versus the rest of the business world?
Well, no, thank you, Mark. And I really am privileged to be part of this. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Pat Smith, you can call me Pat. I've been around the co-op system. Well, I just passed my 43rd year of a career, and it started a long time ago taking out garbage in the grocery business. So I've been part of the retail network for the majority of my career. I've moved across the West in a number of different retail locations, and from there I had worked for Federated Co-op for a few years. And then I went into a role before this in Winnipeg as the Associate Vice President for the Winnipeg region, which is basically the province of Manitoba. And then I came into this role about 2 years ago, just over 2 years now. So that's kind of the gist of my career. I'm originally a Flin Flon Manitoban, so that's my still my hometown base. So, but currently living in Saskatoon.
Well, I want to unpack that a little bit, Pat, because you have this kind of really interesting trajectory where you've kind of spanned Western Canada, and it seems like, just intuitively, it sounds like you're bringing all that experience to bear in your current role. Before you tell me a bit about that, can you also just explain what Federated Cooperatives is for people who may not know?
Sure. Federated Co-op is the centrally wholesale administration arm of the co-op retailing system across Western Canada. Federated is owned by the 168 retail co-ops that make up the system, and span from northwestern Ontario all the way to the BC coast and onto the island even. So from there we have about 1,500 locations amongst them co-ops. We have over 20,000 employees, and we provide them with goods mainly focused in petroleum, food, home and building, and agriculture. But we also provide numerous other services in finance and HR and many, many different areas that it takes to run businesses. This cooperative system is made up of retail co-ops as small as $1 million and as big as $1.2 billion. So there's a vast variety of retails out there, and it takes quite a army to service these retails, and at all different levels. So it's quite a chore, but it's been a wonderful experience learning and seeing the rest of Western Canada and the retail. So
yeah, no, that's really helpful. We've had conversations. A colleague at the center here has had conversations with a couple of retails, one in Winkler, and then the other one in Alberta, and what came out of those conversations was just how much each of the locals has their own kind of, they've confronted the crisis in their own unique ways, depending on the circumstances. Of course, there's some commonalities, but there's also these uniqueness features. And so, you've traveled all over Western Canada in your career, and probably just in your own kind of personal life. How has your own experience then helped you in this current role? Maybe tell us a bit about your current role at FCL.
Sure. Well, as Vice President of Retail Operations, basically we're the liaison or the connection between the retails and Federated Co-op, the home office piece. So we have locations, zone offices in Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Regina, Edmonton, and Calgary. So we have teams of individuals out there. There's associate vice presidents and retail advisors that really are the business relationship managers with the retail. So they work closely with the senior leadership teams of the retails and the board, the governance side, and supporting them there and building that relationship. But you get back to the uniqueness of each co-op. We have lots of good things and we provide lots of support, but in the end, the retailers make their decisions as to how they want to do things. And we try and keep them aligned and work with them on that alignment from a system and brand perspective. But you're right, they are unique. And that is one of the strengths of our system, is that they work in their own communities and fit in their own communities and support their communities in the way they see the needs of them members and customers that they feel they need to service that need. So it's very unique.
Yeah, no, in our conversations, so for example, we spoke to Evan Toes in Winkler, and he was saying when the pandemic hit, they had an influx of members of the community who were wanting to volunteer and help stock shelves and price things and I don't know, whatever else, right, happens in a retail. And then Carol Rauheiser in Camrose, Alberta, was telling us also about how, when the local mayors want to know was their food supply secure, they call her, not Toronto, not Saskatoon. They called her, and she had that kind of power to have those kind of relationships. And so I think it's kind of a remarkable feature of the retail system that I think, particularly outside of Western Canada, the rest of Canada doesn't really know about. So I'm always trying to kind of make sure that gets across a little bit, being from Eastern Canada myself.
Well, and it is unique, Mark, in the sense that communities are a big part of the community, or the co-ops are a big part of the communities, and these are typically relatively large businesses in these communities. So yeah, they do have lots of interactions with government and the locals in their respective areas. So they have lots of influence, and they have lots of information that helps these communities and support these communities. So that's really one of the main focuses of them. Yeah, we provide goods and sell members goods, but we're there, for the community as much as anything. So trying to build a bigger and stronger community is our goal.
Yeah, and then you can see that reflected back in some of that loyalty, like that Winkler example, where the community rallied around the co-op in this case.
Absolutely.
And so now let's just talk about FCL's perspective on the crisis. So we've already spoken to some retails, and that's kind of very ground level customer member relationships. But what's it been looking like from your perspective at FCL, where you provide those kind of wholesale services to the rest of the retail system?
Well, and it's been pretty positive. When we look at how we and I wasn't part of the response team. One of my counterparts leads that, but one of the things I was proud about was the fact of how quickly we regrouped and got our focus and got the team together to lead us through this pandemic situation and support the retails, because initially there was just so much communication going on, trying to get to the retails and trying to help them do the right things, and they're looking for all the information they can. But the pandemic team, I have to give full credit to. There was a number of individuals who put in a lot of time and effort into making sure them communications were getting out to the retails on a regular basis. It's the frequency has slowed down now, but there's still a solid communication process with them to ensure they're kept up to date on protocols and doing what they need to do to protect their customers and members. So it was quite an effort. I have to admit. And the big learning I got from this is, as we really centralized our communication much more efficiently and effectively, you know, we didn't have that really in place in the past. So, you know, it really, I found really effective for the retails. They really dove into it and absorbed it and took the information, and we were able to provide them a wealth of information over the period of time, and it's been very advantageous for us. And you know, we've had minimal cases at the retails as a result. You know, so we've had the odd one, you know, probably at the most half a dozen, I'm thinking, over the time of actual live COVID cases, and you know, the response and the procedures that have been put in place, the retails are just you know, they hit the ground running. They got everything in place. They do all the right things, and they've made, you know, they make the necessary take the necessary steps to ensure the absolute safety. And that's, you know, the co-ops are held accountable different than our corporate competitors. The members expect us to set the standard and lead by example, and it's their store, and they want us to do the right things. And you know, for the best part, we have done a bang-up job. I'm very proud of how the retails and Federated itself have responded to this. So
that's great. You know, it's interesting. You talk a lot. You early in part of your answer, you were talking a lot about communications and how that's kind of that you developed this kind of centralized function. One of the things we heard from Carol in Canmore was that she kept using this analogy of signal and noise. And early in the crisis, there was a lot of noise, not a lot of signal. And then she mentioned, you know, FCL was helping kind of clarify or taking that mass of information that would have been out there, and much of it, you know, who do you trust, right, in those environments? What's good information, what's bad information, and distilling it and communicating it effectively. And that it strikes me that that's kind of all the more remarkable given that independence, right? It's not, you're not Toronto headquarters with this command and control structure all the way up and down the line. So it you know, it seems like you have to bring people along, not just
absolutely
push it out the door kind of thing.
I mean, these are class, you know, this is an example of when the retail really relies on our support. I mean, they you know, they do, you know, there's a lot of flexibility in how they do things at their own retails, and they have the ability to do what they want to do. But you know, in these situations, you're absolutely right. You know, that we picked our path and we went down our path, and it really helps them focus on what needs to be done and clear the noise out there. So that's what we do for them. You know, that's our purpose.
Did you have, you know, one of our conversations with Evan, he was talking about they had their AGM had been kind of delayed because of the crisis, and has FCL been involved in any way with helping that process in terms of, you know, here's some tools or here's some ways of organizing your AGM in this new world? Yeah, no, actually,
yeah, we and the retails, you know, that's the feedback we get. We've supported them and guided them on how to do the virtual AGMs, and a lot of how we really communicate out there in a lot of cases is sharing other retail's stories. So, you know, the retails really, you know, sometimes they don't want to hear from Federated, or they don't want us to hear us tell them what to do. And we use the champions out there and share that across the system. And the retails really bite into that really well. And, you know, the virtual AGMs have been, you know, most of the retails, a lot of retails, I won't say most, but a lot of retails have went down that path, and many of them have gone through that process. The government had to, you know, change some of their regulations or rules around it, but it's been going fine. And you know, I don't know how I participated in one, but it's hard to say how engaged the process really is for the members. But it seems to be getting the job done, at least for this year.
Yeah, right. And there's an adaptation process for everybody, right? Members, yeah, and co-ops and retails and the system as a whole. You know, one of the other pieces of conversation, points of conversation that came up in our earlier conversation with the retails was around online ordering and you know, and again, the retail system, given its diversity across the different elements of the CRS, it's probably, I'm guessing there's been a challenge with developing an online ordering tool that would serve everybody.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's one of the challenges of an autonomous two-tier system as we have, you know, and you know, technology is something that, you know, we've been trying to catch up on over the last number of years, and they're still trying to catch up. We have accelerated some of those really urgent needs like online shopping and that, and there are bits and pieces of that coming out now for the retails. Some of them retails will get like they've gone down other paths and adapted or adopted different technology or different solutions to meet their needs for the time being, and over time hopefully we can get a better system for everybody that's a little more consistent and standardized for the rest of the retails too. So,
you know, one just on that point, one thing that really struck me in the conversation with Carol in Camrose was how they pivoted very quickly to just kind of amplify this kind of delivery service that they'd long had and the curbside pickup. But she was saying, and you know, when she said it, it struck me as very true that a lot of members and customers just prefer to call in and say, here's what I want. I don't want to click 1,000 buttons and spend, because it seems that's a pretty time consuming process, whereas you can drum up a list, say, here's what I want, thank you very much, I'll pick it up tomorrow, we're good to go.
Yeah, you know, and that's some of our demographics, you know, we have as customers. That's you know, we've had many of our co-ops would have delivery service already in place and have for a long time. So, you know, to adapt that a little bit to accommodate the new world is pretty easy, you know, but the technology of the new generations is different, and we are trying to adapt to meet that need as well, because we need to recognize them customers just as much as our traditional, you know, our past traditional customers. So it's coming, and there are sites out there now that we've made the move on, but it's a slow process out there when we're rolling out to the number of locations we have and the diverse co-ops that we have out there. So it's not as simple as having a process like our competitors have that can just push out really quick. So
right, because the products are standardized across all the various grocery stores in across the country, right? At a Sobeys or whatever. What about you know, one thing that people may not know about FCL is that they have a refinery, and that the oil and gas business, of course, took a major hit with this crisis. What did things look like from there? Do you have a line of sight into that? And how is
no, I have a line of sight on the retail demand. So, you know, yes, and Federated Coop owns a 130,000 barrel production refinery in Regina, and that services the co-op's needs across Western Canada. Definitely, you know, on the energy side, you know, on the traveling side, the fuel, like everybody else, took a major hit at the co-ops. You know, their volumes decreased substantially as everybody stayed home, and for the best part, it's recovered mostly. There's still some new, you know, people are adopting new ways of doing things, and I don't know if it will fully recover to what it was, but it's got back to quite close to where it was before pre-COVID. But you know, it's had its challenges. It's a big part of our business, and you know, it hurts when you lose that kind of business over a period of months. And some of the retailers are more dependent on that fuel business than others, or they may not be as diverse in other commodities. So when they're focused on that one or two products lines, it hurts. It doesn't hurt. It hurts them when they see that kind of change in business in a short period of time. So.
Now, I understand that globally within the CRS, there was a demand increase spike for the grocery side business. Did that roughly offset the kind of the destruction of demand from the oil and gas sector? Or how would you characterize that relationship?
No, it wouldn't. Our energy business does probably 75% of our business. So when it drops as big as it did, it's pretty significant impact to us. But the food business, and that has been a shining star for us over that period of time. A lot of our rural co-ops have done very well in the food because nobody's traveling and nobody's going to the big discounters in the cities. So that's really helped them, and it's softened the impact of the energy side somewhat as well, and as well in the home and building centers. It was a little shock at the start, but once everybody realized, well, I might as well stay home and do renovations, that business kind of picked up as well. So it's been very positive from that aspect. We're also reliant on agriculture, and that's been impacted, but it not to the degree the energy side has, and people need to eat, and farmers are a big part of our business too. So we're hoping that this year produces a good crop, and that'll help even more. So
right. One, maybe just staying focused on COVID. I have one question, maybe a little bit odd and funny, and you can tell me if you can answer it or not. But toilet paper. Early in the crisis, I remember feeling that pressure of should I hoard toilet paper? I did my best to not, but what did it look like from your perspective as the kind of buyer for the system? What were you hearing or seeing, and how did that shake out? How did you manage buy vis-a-vis your competitors? Like, did you have a good claim on that, or what did that look like?
Well, and I'm not the buyer. It's there's other divisions that do that, but I know a little bit about. The demand was very excessive in a number of areas, not just toilet paper. Disinfectants and that type of stuff, and manufacturers basically couldn't keep up. I mean, it wasn't. The supply was a struggle, as when a lot of that supply chain, there isn't vast warehouses of products sitting there. It's a kind of supply on demand type of a process out there, and when the forestry industry gets shut down and things like that, that supply these manufacturers, it impacts all through all businesses. So it was pretty significant. We work closely and have strong relationships with our vendors and suppliers, and they do what they can for you when you have them good relationships. We managed through. A lot of retails controlled what customers could buy and that type of stuff. So once they realize or recognize that, they get on that pretty quick. So it was an issue for a few weeks, but it kind of settled down after everybody realized that it's not going to collapse. The food system isn't going to collapse on us. So,
one just now to kind of elevate the conversation a little bit more strategic level. One thing that a lot of people have been talking about because of the crisis and is kind of reassessing the kind of way that supply chains are organized and their kind of transnational characteristics. And there's a lot of talk about relocalizing production and relocalizing supply chains. Has that kind of conversation happened at all with you folks, or is it something that's you're thinking about? Or
Mark, we traditionally have been a strong supplier on local anyway. So the local co-ops want that flexibility to support their local growers as well. So we have that built into our network already. We have some strong local programs that support local and Western Canada growing. We are, in our eyes, our competitors copy us, but we are the true local supplier and company in the communities. So they you know, they need that ability to do it because they've always done it. And so, but, you know, and we continue to work towards, you know, a strong local supply through our programming and partnering with a number of different farmers and companies out there to do that.
Do you see this as in any way as a strategic advantage? I mean, you mentioned your competitors encroaching, or at least rhetorically,
they like to
rhetorically
copycat us.
encroaching.
They like to copycat us. You know, we are truly local. We're owned by the local members and of that community. So, you know, we really play that to our advantage, and the members know that. But our competitors copy it. They know it's a strength. They want to get on that bandwagon too, and you know, that's what the public wants. You know, they don't want produce or things shipped across the world. They want things to minimize the impact on the environment, and them are big issues nowadays with the public and the average customer out there for sure.
So one term that I know Scott Banda, the CEO, talks a lot about, and that we heard Carol talk about in her conversation, was this relevancy. What does relevancy look like? And you know, I recognize you're having these conversations, so it's probably not all settled, right? But you know, how's your thinking evolving about what relevancy looks like in this world versus the world that was just you know, a few months ago? Does it change at all, or is it?
Well, it may, I mean, when we talk about relevancy from our perspective, we talk about relevancy to our end user consumer, and we talk about relevancy to our local co-ops. So, you know, what is the value we bring to them, and how do we bring that forward, and how does it get recognized is the key when we talk about it to our consumers or to our co-ops. But to our consumers, it's, you know, we watch the markets, we watch the trends, we look at the demands, and we are trying to adapt and evolve our systems and processes as fast as we can to meet them needs. I mean, in the end, you know, we got to supply goods to our retailers that meet the needs of their consumers. And, you know, that relevancy of them, I think it stands out more now than it ever has, because, you know, the community has been a big part of, you know, how communities have responded and supported their residents. You know, it's been, and the co-ops have been standing beside them, helping, and that's what it's been about for us. So relevancy, in my mind, has been never stronger in situations like this. This is where we can really stand out and shine.
So one last kind of area of questions, Pat, is and you flagged a little bit of this in terms of government. You mentioned that, you know, maybe the acts, or there had to be some adjustments around AGMs, for example. Has there been any other area where you've had interactions with government that would have played out, you know, for the CRS as a whole?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not involved in that area, Mark, so it's hard for me to answer. I know strategy. Our government relations team is always engaged with government, and you know, trying to influence what, you know, we feel is best for the co-op system and the co-op movement as a whole, and that's an ongoing effort. In regards to this, you know, we were dealing with provincial regulations, and, you know, having them discussions as to how they impact us, and that on a regular basis. So.
Yeah, I guess maybe, and it sounds like maybe this conversation didn't happen, but it's intriguing to me that there, you know, you think as part of the pandemic response, one of the key things you want to make sure is that the people are getting food, right? And so a lot of the retails would have been doing that. And Kara was telling me her conversations with her kind of rural parts of her retail were really important with those mayors. They wanted assurances that their citizens would have food. And so it strikes me that, you know, if this crisis had been more severe or something, if it continued, there'd probably be some level of conversation where the government would want to make, you know, have a chat with the grocers.
And you know, they may have. I mean, our we did work hard. You know, the distribution centers were inundated with volumes, you know, which they're not set up for, you know, but we adapted really quick. Our buyers adapted really quick, and overall we felt a really good job in making sure that supply chain was strong, and the volume of what the retails needed was there. So it wasn't perfect, but I think overall, when we look at how the business that we did get, we were pretty pleased with how things went overall from our perspective and how we serviced the retails. That's always the issue with us, is that these are customers. They can if they want, buy somewhere else. So we have to always remember that, and our employees, our team members, always have to recognize the fact that we got to work double hard to keep them. So it's not a corporate structure where they have to buy from us.
Right, right. And I was just going to say, I think that may surprise people who are not familiar with the system, right? You would think that, particularly since they're the owners of Federated, right? The retails own Federated. The assumption might be, from an outside perspective, that they would just automatically, of course, they would use their own wholesaler to get what they need. But we know that's not the case, and both in the CRS, but elsewhere in the cooperative world. This is a perennial challenge, but also a strength at once, right? It's a weakness and a strength in both.
Yep, absolutely. No, and it just makes us work doubly hard to ensure we're listening and meeting those needs of them retails.
So Pat, you've been very generous with your time. I promise to try and keep this to 30 minutes or thereabouts. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked you about, or that we haven't covered, that you think it's important for people to know?
About the cooperative movement, or
no, about the retail system and the pandemic, and how you've kind of fared through that, and any kind of big point that we may want.
I think we've talked about the main points. Overall, the retails are, from my perspective, are performing really well under the circumstances. That's our job, is to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of that, how they're doing financially and successfully, and and of course. The big change is the virtual part. Typically, we're doing a lot of face-to-face meetings, and that's starting to come back now. We're starting to get the people are starting to get out there and starting to meet the people. We always got to remember that the retails have been front and center on this pandemic from day one, and they haven't been sitting at home. I call I'm hiding in my office here at home. They haven't been doing that. They've been on the front line, facing the public day in, day out, and we're forever grateful for what all the retailers have done, not just the co-ops, but the people that are doing that. I can't imagine being in them shoes, and the stresses and pressure that they have to try and keep them personal selves healthy. So we're just thankful for the efforts the retails have done overall, and we're really, really proud that they've evolved and adapted as well as they did in such a short order. So
I think one of our conversations earlier suggests this has become very obvious. This is an essential service, and we are grateful for that. Pat Smith, thank you so much for your time today. You're the VP of Retail Operations at Federated Cooperatives Limited. Really thankful for sharing your insights into this pandemic from your perspective.
Much appreciated, my privilege. So thank you, Mark.